Well, what do you say to the Chief Justice's concern at the outset of this conversation about the free speech rights of civil servants? And we're numbering the millions now across this country. And if it is within the scope of your duty, and if you're going to define that very, very broadly, you give the government a lot of power over limiting what many millions of Americans can say. And surely that must be some concern to you.
It is a concern that has to be balanced against the right of people in the town. I think there's some irony that the petitioners in the first case in the United States say the way to solve the First Amendment problem is for the government just to tell people how to use their pages.
Well, and there's some irony on the other side to say the way to solve the First Amendment problem is to turn it all into government speech, right? So the government controls what millions of civil servants in towns, large, small, and the federal government alike, what they can and cannot say in the public forum.
So admittedly, there's going to be some issue of government control, but I don't think that's escapable. For instance, if the mayor of Port Huron had wanted to, she obviously could have told Mr. Freed, either stop posting your directives to your personal page, or when you post them, also post this additional information. Or when you answer a question about this directive, answer it in this way. So that sort of control is already going to be there, regardless of whether he's considered a state actor.
It would be on a clearly public page.
As
the question,
yes.
Clearly, the question is whether it might also have to be on a page maintained, somebody thought personally, that they came up with before they became a government official, that's mostly populated by dog pictures, and whether the government can also mandate what the person can say there. And if that's the case, what's left of that person's free speech rights?
So
I mean, we used to care about public employee private speech rights, Garcetti, Pickering,
Yeah. And I think, as your question alludes to, there is a doctrine under the First Amendment that reconciles the First Amendment rights of a public official against the government's interest in the speech. One of the key points that we're making is the exact same factors that you look to decide whether the government has an interest in the speech and therefore has some control over it, even when it's ostensibly private speech. Those are things like, are you purporting to do your job on the page? Are you holding yourself out as a public official? And if so, can the government tell you, if you're going to use your title on your page, as many people do, just make clear you are saying this in your private capacity. And if the government can say that to you, consistent with the First Amendment, then you sort of understand that there's not going to be a different First Amendment equation just because we're calling it state action as well.
Well, I mean, on these pages, people have both a job in the government and they have all sorts of other things, whether it's cats or children or whatever it is. And the problem, it seems to me, is we kind of have to disaggregate that, right? And say, well, you know, you have to have a governmental page and you have to have a private page, and you can't mention the government on your private page or else it's going to become a government page. And as I understand it, you basically say if you've got 5% government, then we, the government, can basically say the whole thing, even if the rest of it is all about your children and the dogs, that's ours. And if we don't like little dogs, we can say, you can't put pictures of little dogs on there. And it seems to me that effort to kind of disentangle the two things doesn't really reflect the reality of how social media works.
So, Your Honor, I have to push back in two respects. First—
About the dogs, or?
A little bit about the dogs. So, one principle is it's not the 5% versus 95% that you've gotten over some threshold. It's the way you're using your page as an ongoing place where people in the town go to get information about what you as a city manager are doing, how you're doing your job, the directives that you issue. If you set it up that way, that's the quality that you're looking for.
Well, just